When Rachael Rollins was sworn in as the new U.S. Attorney for Massachusetts earlier this month, she left an empty seat at the helm of the Suffolk County District Attorney's office, which she was elected to in 2018 with more than 70% of the vote, largely on a platform of criminal justice reform. And to finish up Rollins' term, Governor Charlie Baker tapped my next guest, now Interim District Attorney Kevin Hayden, who'd been heading up the state's Sex Offender Registry Board and served as Assistant Suffolk County DA for more than a decade prior. DA Hayden, congratulations and welcome.
Thank you, Jim. Good to see you again.
Good to see you too. How'd you get the job? Did you reach out to the governor or did the governor reach out to you?
When I found out about the possibility that Rachael Rollins would go to the U.S. Attorney's Office and become the U.S. Attorney, I asked for the governor to consider me.
And you have said in repeated interviews, you don't know yet if you're running for re-election. Is that not just a formality? Why would you dislocate yourself and take a job for such a small amount of time rather than saying, this is what I want to do, and at the appropriate time, I'll say that I'm running for a full term?
It's highly likely that that's what will happen. I am still in the process of making some decisions. I am day to day working hard at getting up to speed here, having conversations with my family about this, and there will be a decision coming soon.
Dan Conley was your former boss when you were an assistant DA. His quote about your ascension to the role was that he believed you'd embrace a more traditional prosecutor's role. Is Conley right?
I don't think I've ever been a traditional prosecutor, even when I was working for Dan Conley. I've always cut my teeth on being a prosecutor that thought it was equally as important to be community engaged, involved in intervention and prevention strategies as it was to be involved in enforcement. So, you know, I was hired by Ralph. Dan reminded me at one point that I actually worked longer for him than I did for Ralph. But I don't know if conventional would be the right word.
Ralph as in Ralph Martin for people who may be new to the area. I asked your predecessor about you and what she thought of your choice, and here's what Rachael Rollins had to say.
I didn't formally give a list to the governor, but I had a very positive conversation with Mr. Hayden.
Did he speak to a commitment to continue your view that caused you to win a landslide election, your view of what criminal justice should look like in Suffolk County?
I encourage you to have him on your show and talk to him about what he'd like his administration to be. But I have been clear, Jim, the people of Suffolk County voted for 4 years of what we proposed.
She encouraged me to ask you, so I'll ask you, how much of the Rollins philosophy are you prepared to embrace, District Attorney?
So I think when you look at the overall rationales behind the philosophy, and I have had several very good conversations with U.S. Attorney Rollins, when you talk about the overview of reducing our carceral footprint, not criminalizing poverty and drug addiction, when you talk about reform and not prosecuting low-level offenses and dealing with more violent crime, those are all things that I stand behind and support. Those are things I've always stood behind and support, even when I was in the DA's office many years ago.
So when you say you would not prosecute low-level offenses, I think a lot of people misunderstood. Rollins never said, I will never prosecute them. She said, and I'll put words in her mouth, there's a rebuttable presumption that they will not be prosecuted, that instead we'll do some diversion kind of thing. Is that where you are on the more minor offenses? She listed 15 in particular.
Yes, and in addition to that, I think that accountability measures and diversions need to be continued to be fostered and built in even increasing measure. So, you know, the reality is, as I understand it, that for under Rollins' administration, about 25% of those cases were not prosecuted. Yeah. I think under Dan Conley, it was only about 15% more that were not prosecuted. So I don't know if there was not necessarily a huge schism there, but I do think that it's important to look at accountability measures short of prosecution. It's important to look at diversion. It's important to take into account that low-level offenses should hopefully not carry someone forward with negativity for the rest of their life.
And her Integrity Review Bureau that led to the release of a number of men, mostly black men, most of whom had served decades in jail for crimes that they absolutely did not commit or very likely did not commit. Will that continue on your watch as well?
Absolutely. We have to be willing to not only look forward into how we're handling cases, but also to be able to look back and be willing to correct errors when they're made.
So what changes will you make in this intervening 9, 10, 11 months until 10 months until there's an election, District Attorney?
Well, I think that if there are changes that are going to be made, I think it could take longer than 9, 10, or 11 months. So I don't know if the changes will be readily apparent. Nothing is changing as of right now as we look deeply into what's going on. We will be driven by best practices and be driven by the data and statistics that are out there when we make a determination as to our policy.
It seems to me that the public trust in a district attorney's office is at least in part a function of how much people trust the police with whom you work. This has been a hell of a year. There's a long-term police officer, went on to be president of the union, credibly charged with serial sexual assault. A guy who was commissioner for a day, actually for 2 days, removed from that post amidst charges of domestic violence, overtime scandals. Do you see part of your responsibility to help fix what ails the Boston Police Department?
Well, I think when I look at the Boston Police Department overall, I think that there are far more good officers and good things that are being done by the Boston Police Department than bad. I think when you look at wrongdoing, corruption, and/or even criminal activity that may have happened or alleged to have happened, that absolutely cannot stand or be tolerated. When you're in a position, and that carries through to our office too, as prosecutors, being in a position of public trust, being in a position where we have authority, we have to be held to a higher standard. We have to be willing to examine ourselves and to root out any ills or wrongdoings that may take place.
When you were working in the DA's office in your former life, one of the things you were in charge of was the Safe Neighborhoods Initiative, and I know you work with gangs. I'm sure you saw the editorial in the Globe the other day, and it's not just the editorial that talks about this gang database and the lack of transparency and accountability, drawing people in who are there purely because of the neighborhood they live in or a casual associate. Should it be reformed, eliminated, kept as is? What's your take on that?
I don't think it should be eliminated, and I don't think it can be kept as is. I think it's going to need to be carefully looked at and reformed and refined so that we know that it's not being used in any impartial way, that it's not being used in any way that's unfair or that's unfairly targeting people. But I would not want to see it go away. I think that would greatly hamper our law enforcement partners and their ability to do their job.
You know, before you go away, District Attorney, you were supposed to be here last week, and you were not here, unfortunately, because of the death of your father. I didn't know your father, but I read about him since he died. Could you spend the final minute and talk about him rather than us talking about you? He was a pretty impressive man.
Sure. I'll try not to get too emotional here, but yeah, my dad did a lot for the city of Boston, did a lot for Suffolk County, dedicated his life to public service in different arenas than I am now. But his dedication to public service is what drove me to dedicate myself to public service as well. His work ethic is embedded in me, and I take tremendous pride in that. And his pride in our community, in Black history, in our Black culture, and understanding that history in our culture, and knowing that we need to understand it in order to understand not only who we are now, but where we're going, is something that was vitally important to him and is vitally important to me and my entire family. And he is the patriarch that really built that foundation.
Well, I wish I'd met him. Glad to have met you. Good luck in your job. Hope to see you a lot in the coming months.
All right. Well, thank you very much.